Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Allen. I'm the interim director of the Thurman Institute, and I'm very pleased that everybody made it out in the rain. Of course, you know, we have months and months of drought, and then we decide to have an event, and it rains. So that's just a wonderful thing, but that's okay. That's okay. I have a couple of announcements that I'd like to make before we get our talk going this evening. The first is that we have Ann Hunter is here tonight, and she is the new president-elect of the Clemson Alumni Association, and she's one of us here, so we're very happy for Ann. And I also wanted to announce that Dr. Bill Cheesem and his wife Betsy have agreed to be the co-chairs of the Patrons Council this year, and I'm eternally grateful for them for doing that, so I very much appreciate you agreeing to take that on this year. And so my other role tonight is to introduce the introducer. But I do have one little story that I would like to share about Jane Robelot. And that is, I had the honor of a couple of years ago to work with her very shortly on a very short-lived television show that we were trying to do out of Clemson University. It was going to be a sit-down talk show based on environmental issues, and I was going to be the host, and we were trying to sell it to ETV, and the production crews here at Clemson had me over in the studios, and they brought in Jane to coach me, to teach me, and she did an excellent job. But I have to say one thing that I'm disappointed in. She told me another little story tonight about teaching Sunday school. And she said when she taught Sunday school, she would always take her students out for Krispy Kreme donuts. Well, she didn't take me out for Krispy Kreme donuts, so I'm a little disappointed in that. But that, yeah, that's okay. But I would like to introduce Mr. Tim Beret has joined us this evening, and he will be introducing Jane and her husband Mario. And we're very pleased to have him here. And I'm very pleased to see, when I actually looked up some stuff on Tim, I know he's the stats man, but the thing that I was pleased to see that there's somebody who's been working at Clemson longer than I have. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Mr. Tim Beret, who will introduce our speakers this evening.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here tonight, and life has been really good for me. Now the Tigers are 7-0, ranked in the top 10 of the country. I get to introduce my longtime friend Jane Robelot tonight, and tomorrow I get to spend the whole day with Erin Andrews. She's coming tomorrow to do a feature on Sammy Watkins. About 30 years ago, I would have thought that maybe Jane Robelot would have been the Erin Andrews of the 1980s. She came to work for me as a student assistant. She had a real close friend named Cricket Yates who worked for me at the time. And Jane's senior year, she would go to the Clemson football games, sit in the press box and take notes. And then I had her do all the call-in radio reports for radio stations from Minneapolis to Miami. And so she did a very good job with those call-ins, and she was really into sports. And so when she graduated, she said she wanted to go into kind of radio and television. So I thought she'd be a pretty good person to recommend, because she was always a person who thought outside the box, and there was no goal unattainable. And when she was a senior, in addition to working for me, she was also the head of Central Spirit. So that year we got off to an 8-0 start. We're getting to play North Carolina on the road in the first battle ever of top 10 teams in ACC history. So she decided they were going to have a pep rally for a road game. And so before the North Carolina game. And so we were 8-0, and Coach Ford was doing a great job. So he thought, we're going to have a Danny Ford appreciation pep rally. So again, having lofty goals and everything that she did, she decided she was going to try to get Bear Bryant to come here and be the featured speaker at this pep rally. Now, keep in mind, Bear Bryant is still coaching at the University of Alabama. This is the 1981 season, and they're ranked 9th while we're ranked 2nd. So he's in the middle of the season, but knowing sports like she did, she noticed that Alabama had an open date that Saturday. What else does he have to do other than just fly to Clemson and come to be the featured speaker of this pep rally? So Jane goes to Frank Howard in his office and knocks on his door and goes in and tells her idea, and if Coach Howard would call Bear Bryant for her. Well, those of you here might know Coach Howard. He wasn't going to disappoint a very pretty little co-ed, so he picks up the phone and calls Bear Bryant on his direct line number. And wouldn't you love to have had a tape of that conversation? So they went back and forth, and I don't know if he put you on the phone with, I think he did put you on the phone with Bear Bryant, yeah. But he politely declined, and he had to do a little recruiting that weekend. So Jane's career in broadcasting, I do claim a little bit of credit for this, really started in the lobby of the, what was then W.J. Bray's is now the Blue Heron. It was there that I ran into a guy named Ken Allison, who was the head of WCCP radio, and in those days, you barely could get outside of the campus. But I asked him if he had any jobs available, and I told him about Jane, and he should think about hiring her. Well, he decided he was going to expand things a bit. I think he just started a show called Tri-County Highlights. And so he hired Jane to do that, and then she got into sports a lot more, and one thing led to another, and she had a scoreboard show after games. And so one day the people from FBC Radio in Greenville were driving over to do an interview with Coach Ford, and they heard Jane on the air, and they were impressed. And so one thing led to another, and Jane got offered a job at WFBC Radio. So it was still another couple of years after that before she was going to press conferences, and the people at WSPA Television took note of the questions she was asking in press conferences. Not to be Jane was never a shy person, obviously. And then so they really made the big step, because Jane had never been on television before, and they hired her to be on television at Channel 7. It wasn't long after that she was the anchor at Channel 7, then became the anchor at WCAU in Philadelphia, and then she did a great job at a convention, as I remember, one of those conventions, political conventions, and lo and behold, one day I got a call she was going to go to New York. And that was in 1995, and she worked in New York for 4 years. During that time, though, always kept her allegiance to Clemson, to the fact that in 1997 came to a game, and her now husband, Mario, proposed to Jane while she was dotting the I in Tigers. And you can look it up. Only person ever to be proposed to while she's dotting the I, and Clemson. She stayed there through 1999 and went to the CBS affiliate at Atlanta, and now she's back here in the Greenville area with Carolina Zoom Productions. So it's take great pride in introducing, without a doubt, the most famous student assistant I've ever had, but also I think one of the best people that's ever worked for me.
What a sweet thing to say. Thank you. Thank you. You know who could have worked for Tim Beret and he didn't hire her? Sean Weatherly. Do y'all remember Miss Universe? Didn't you turn her down for a job? Or was that Mr. Bradley? It was you? Okay. Oh, it was sight unseen. Well, thank you all very much for being with us tonight. I appreciate that so much, Tim. And you're right, my broadcasting career completely, you should take, well, pride. I guess it turned out to be a pretty good career. It all started with Tim Beret. It absolutely did. So thank you, my dear friend, for encouraging me along the way, too. This is my husband, Mario Di Carvalho, the man who proposed to me in front of 77,000 of our closest friends. And that was pretty bold. Everybody said, oh, you knew he was going to propose. I said, if you had seen the condition of my fingernails, you would have known that I was not expecting a diamond. So, and Jeff, yes, We need to get somebody in here. If somebody would like to sponsor that show on PBS, Jeff would be excellent, because we were talking about food or fuel. And I so enjoyed spending that day with you, because I learned so much as we were talking about the show. So we're still working on that one. It's a joy for me and for Mario to be here. Anytime we get to come to Clemson, it's just always a treat. Hey, Ann. And I have so many dear friends here. But Mario and I have seen so many things. I think when Joyce and I first talked about what we would talk about tonight, we were looking at presidential politics, and then I thought, no, I'm going to invite Mario to come and share the stage with me, because the things that we have seen together have just been fascinating, and it's been such a privilege as a graduate of Clemson University, as a South Carolinian, as a constituent of Strom Thurmond, to be able to go out and see the things I've seen, and then to have the privilege of bringing those stories back to you all. And of course, as you know, there's always another story behind what you see on the air. So if you don't mind, we'll just share some stories tonight. I know he's my husband, but I think that Mario Di Carvalho is probably one of the most fascinating, if not the most fascinating people that I know. That's not always a good thing, most of the time. But Mario speaks 8 languages fluently, including Hebrew and Arabic. He has been to 64 countries with his job. He has covered 14 wars and conflicts, or been in or fought, covered 14 wars and conflicts, 50-something hurricanes. If you name pretty much any incident that happened anywhere in the world between about 1975 and up until a couple of years ago, chances are Mario was there. I don't know that he had much to do with it other than covering it, let me say. But Mario served as a commando in the Portuguese army. He was trained at Fort Bragg. Part of his training was at Fort Bragg. And I believe that as a soldier, as a warrior, he received so much great training that made him an excellent cameraman, and also probably saved his life a few times. I want to keep us on track too. What time do we want to wrap up, Joyce?
Just about now.
About now. Listen to him, he's getting nervous. And I want to make sure we have time for questions. But okay, Dave said if y'all start leaving, if y'all get hungry, I brought cookies, and then you'll stay longer. But just to begin tonight, and thank you, Jeff, for working all this out. We appreciate that. Anwar Sadat. Many of you remember Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt from 1970 till he was assassinated in '81. At the bottom you see the peace accords, the Middle East Peace Treaty that President Carter helped to broker in 1979, signed by Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin. Sadly, both of these men were assassinated by fundamentalists within their own countries. Mario Di Carvalho was covering Anwar Sadat. He lived in Egypt, was based in the Cairo bureau, and covered Anwar Sadat. And at the top, you'll see Anwar Sadat sitting next to a familiar face, Hosni Mubarak, who was just deposed allegedly by the people of Egypt as their president. Hosni Mubarak was the vice president of Egypt at the time, and of course assumed the presidency when Sadat was killed. To hear, I'll never forget that moment. It was a beautiful day in October, crystal clear skies. It was 1981, so Tim will tell you we were as yet undefeated in football. And I was walking across campus. I had just passed the Cooper Library, and I was on that little bridge when I heard that Anwar Sadat had been assassinated. And I remember crying, and I remember that all the students were talking about it. And for me, it was a big moment in my time here at Clemson. But to hear Mario talk about him, give us, if you would, Mario, some of your thoughts, some of the inside of he's one of the people that you say you respect most of all of the people that you've covered, right?
Yeah, that picture on the left is in November 1977, end of October, November 77, he mentioned a couple of times talking to the Egyptian parliament that there would be no peace in the Middle East without compromise. And coming from an Arab leader, this was unheard of at that time. And Walter Cronkite was smart enough, was unbelievable guy, but he was smart enough to read on what he had said a couple of times, twice only, you know, just 2 times he said it. And I was based in Egypt at the time after spending 2 years, 76, 77, in Lebanon, covering the Civil War. I had just gotten to Egypt, and I got a call from CBS in New York saying that Walter Cronkite was coming to Cairo. And we didn't know exactly what it was, and everything was very, it was a big secret because we were in the same building with NBC and ABC. CNN and Fox and all the others did not exist at the time. And someone picked up Walter Cronkite, they brought him to our office, and he then told us, and this is the first time I met Walter Cronkite, face to face. I've worked with him for 2 years before in Lebanon, and he told us, I'm here to interview President Sadat because I know that he's going to say something that's going to change the world. This is what Walter Cronkite was. And 2 days later, he was in hiding. Walter Cronkite was in hiding because we could not run the risk that NBC and ABC would see him. And 2 days later, we went to the Alhambra Palace, and we set up everything, and that comes Sadat, and he sat down and said hello to everybody, and within 5 minutes, he said, I will go to Jerusalem if I have to bring peace to my people. And with those words, he knew that he was going to get killed. He told us about 2 years later, a year and a half later, from that date, he told us, I am going to be assassinated, but I'm going to die for my people. And strangely enough, in the anniversary of the biggest victory of any Arab army, October 6th, and that's the picture on the right, he was assassinated by Muslim extremists. I had the pleasure and the absolute, it's a blessing. You cannot plan these things, and it's a blessing. I was thrown into the peace process, and I was 27 years old. I had just finished 3 consecutive combat tours in Africa as a soldier, then Lebanon, and I didn't know much about politics. And all of a sudden, here I am going to Morocco to meet with the king, and then Jimmy Carter comes into Egypt, and this incredible, it's a snowball. It starts rolling and rolling, and one day I'm told, you're going to Jerusalem tomorrow. I'm in Cairo. You're going to Jerusalem. I said, not really, they kind of don't like each other, how are we going to go? I said, no, you're going with Sadat. And when Sadat is going to Jerusalem, oh yeah, he's going to meet Menachem Begin. And here I am on the plane with Sadat flying to Jerusalem. Again, unheard of. It can't happen. And it happened. Then I came to Camp David, and that's the picture down here when, they signed the peace treaty, and it took 2 guys with an incredible courage and determination to make it happen. And I am afraid that they almost made it happen. In light of the situation in Egypt and in the Middle East and what's going on in the Middle East nowadays, I am afraid that they're not going to make it. We thought they did. They thought they did. There was a lot of hope, but I'm afraid that things are turning around, and it's not going to happen. I hope I'm 100% wrong, but I fear for the situation.
Well, let me ask you that before we move to the next one. The world seemed to sort of celebrate the so-called Arab Spring and the removal of Hosni Mubarak from office, and yet it seems that the Christians in Egypt are certainly not secure. When they went to peacefully protest in Cairo, they were run over with tanks. And there's a great deal of concern now that Egypt will no longer be a secular state, but will fall into the hands of the Islamic extremist. What do you see? Is democracy a possibility in Egypt?
I don't think so. I do not think so. Because I would like, if any of you can mention one Arab country that is a democracy, please let me know. Because I don't know of any, not a single country understands, they know what democracy is, but I don't think they understand what democracy brings to their people and how they can thrive within a democracy. It's an entire different way of being. It's tribal. You know, those places in the Middle East are called countries, but what they are tribes. There's different tribes, and they got together, and the tribe with more guns rules. You know, you have a great, one of the examples is Jordan. Jordan does not exist. 2/3 of Jordan is Palestine, and only 1/3 of Palestine is what now it's considered Israel after the Balfour Declaration in 1949, 1950. But the tribe that has more guns is the Hashemites. So the other name for Jordan is the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, but they're a minority. And if you take this to every single Arab country, it's always the same. It's the guys that have not the numbers-wise, but guns-wise. Mm-hmm. And what happens, what's happening in the Middle East, in the Arab world nowadays, is that we have to understand that the Muslim extremists are very, very well organized. And if you don't believe me, just think about Fallujah. If you don't, and I was there. Think about what happened in Iraq, how they accepted us in 2003 in the initial entry. How we fought very hard, all the way up to Baghdad, but we only fought one certain part of the people, of the armed forces. All the extremists disappeared. And then when we were there and established, they reunited, and the extremists fought us, and they're still fighting us. And the big difference between us and them is they have all the time in the world. It's the same situation in Afghanistan. They couldn't care less. They have nowhere to go, and they're not coming from anywhere. They're just there. Alexander the Great, they defeated him. They defeated the Pakistanis. They defeated the almighty Soviet army in 1986, and I was there. And I tell you, he was serious. It was unbelievable. I went from Kabul to Mazar Sharif with Soviet special forces and a bunch of guys, with goats and machine guns and the wives and the kids and it's like a tribe moving around. They beat them to a pulp. A trip that should have taken 6 hours took us 5 days. And by the time we got there, half of the Soviet special forces were dead. And I was scared to death because I didn't think I was going to. All I thought about is, how am I going to get back to Kabul to get out of here? It's like, now I'm here and I don't like this place, Mazar Sharif. How do I get out of here? And thank God I got on a helicopter and got out of there. But this is the situation. And we really have to understand that Christians are a minority. Yeah. They practically don't exist. There's a lot of numbers, but again, they have no power. And all this Arab Spring, as far as I'm concerned, in my mind, and maybe it's a simplistic way of looking at it, but I don't think so, because I lived there for 8.5 years and I speak their language. And I made the point of learning their language so I could argue with them and really provoke them to get what really motivates them. Okay. And it's time. Time motivates them. They couldn't care less. You're going to be here 5 years? Not a problem. We'll be killing you here and there, but We'll just wait.
Just the opposite of our mindset, then.
We go there to be there for a year. After a year, okay, I got to get out. I got to go. I have my family in the U.S. They don't. They just wait. 5 years, 10 years, 15. It really doesn't matter. They tell you, we've been invaded for 100 years, and we're still here. And we haven't changed our ways to nothing. And, you know, Sadat knew all that. Sadat knew he had to go to Jerusalem. Sadat knew he had to talk to the Israelis with the help of the United States of America, of course. And I hope they make it. I hope those three guys make it, but I'm very worried.
And we'll get back to Iraq, so we'll put a period at the end of that sentence. Anybody remember that? He had a pretty good chance to be the President of the United States until that. This was my very first political convention, 1988 Democratic Convention down in Atlanta. I was working with WSPA TV, and I got to cover both political conventions that year, which was just a real thrill. And I have to say that as a patriot, it was a pretty cool thing to be there, to witness the son of Greek immigrants, a first-generation American, walking across the stage to the tune of Neil Diamond's Coming to America to accept the nomination for his party to run for the presidency. A good man. Mario was on the campaign trail. We'll kind of go fast through this one, but yes, Mario was there. That's the famous tank picture, and here it is from Mario's camera. So what went through your mind that day, Mario, as you were covering? You were on the Dukakis campaign. You were with the bus that covered everything the man did for 6 months straight.
It was my first campaign. I got back to the U.S. in 1984. I was based in Miami to cover El Salvador, Nicaragua, the drug wars. And then they told me, you want to go and cover a campaign? And I thought, not really. You know, I don't do this for a living. You know,
you'd rather be shot at, in other words?
People shoot at me all the time, and I dodge bullets. You know,
but I don't shoot at.
I go to a hurricane, and that's it. But I said, you know, maybe it's interesting. Maybe it's something. I haven't done this. Yeah, sure. So I go and I cover Michael Dukakis, and I cover him for the last 4 months of his campaign, 3.5 months. And it was great. It was like from 10,000 people to 12 to 15 to 40, 60,000 people. 110,000 people in Denver.
Wow.
And here's this guy coming to America, and this guy, and we all had, on the press plane, we all had fake eyebrows. So we looked like him, the entire press corps. It was really interesting, really nice. And he was riding, is it the 99-yard line. And he's going to make it. And someone in the press corps, during a debate, said, what do you know about the military? How can we trust you as the commander-in-chief? At those times, it was very important. Kind of changed a little bit. But, yeah. So, the handlers, and I don't know, you probably all know Susan Astridge. She was the head press person. But she got overruled on this one by the strategic committee around Dukakis. Said, let's take this guy to Lansing, Michigan, where they make the M1A1, and put him on top of a tank, get all the cameras, and he'll come around and ride on top of the tanks. Then, you know, he's probably on top of 5 or 6 boxes to be that tall, you know. And they told us, oh, you know, and they were very secretive. You know, it's all this like, we have a fantastic photo op, 10 a.m. tomorrow, let's go. You know, so we go there, and there's a place to put the tripods, and here comes the tank, and here comes Dukakis with a piece of tape that said Dukakis. No soldier has a helmet with a piece of tape that says Joe or Smith. Or, I mean, we know it's Dukakis. We can see his eyebrows. You know? and his nose. I mean, yeah, I got a big nose too, so it's okay. And what's the ABC guy?
Sam Donaldson.
Sam Donaldson is standing right next to me, and we're all shooting, right? And everybody's going, what is this? And Sam Donaldson said out loud, "He's done." And we all look, say, "What?" He said, "He's done. This is the end of his campaign." Oh, come on, Sam. You know, Sam is like, nah. He hated everybody. I said, "Come on, Sam. I'm telling you." I say, "All right." He runs around. We go back to the planes, which is the press plane and the candidate's plane, and we all line up when the candidate comes and starts going up the stairs. And even if there's nobody at the airport, he gets to the top of the stairs, turns around, and goes. And we're like looking. Those are the mechanics, you know.
Really? There was nobody there?
Oh, no, there's nobody there. And Sam Donaldson looked at him and said, "You could have had it all."
Wow.
And
he said that right to Dukakis?
Oh, you know, Sam Donaldson. "You could have had it all, candidate and governor." And you go, and that was it. The next day, half the press of the press plane, half was gone.
Wow.
And then you know something ain't right. You know, it's like when Pat Buchanan came to South Carolina after winning up north, and Pat Buchanan, oh my God! And then Bob Dole is going, "Oh, what? No, who is this guy? You know, oh, you won. You know, the plane was packed with press. We came to South Carolina, and he had like 5 votes, and it was just 3 of us on this 727 back to New Hampshire. Everybody left because he was done. And then I went into the Dole campaign, and then that was like the lobster campaign.
So when the networks don't want to spend the money on you.
Oh yeah, it's over.
It's over.
Yeah.
Okay, this was the next, this was in '88, George H.W. Bush run. The convention was in New Orleans. Again, it was just a real joy and a treat for me to be there to cover this for WSPA, and we covered a great deal of it live. But I pulled this picture just because I remember my female sensibilities being incredibly outraged that the big question at this convention was, who will he choose for his vice presidential running mate? And it really, genuinely, nobody knew, and we were all squeezing Mary Matlin, and she wouldn't give, and I think she just didn't know. And then I remember when they announced it, the word kind of buzzes through the press. You know, you get the buzz before you get the official word, and the buzz was that it's this young senator from Indiana who's really handsome. The campaign likes him because they think that because he's handsome, women will vote for him. Truly, that was the word that, you know, that was going, and I just thought, have we really not come as far as I thought? Really? You think women are going to vote for the guy because you think he's handsome? But the other thing about this campaign that was interesting, the South Carolina connection, Lee Atwater, who was a bulldog of politics and, well, an interesting person to study altogether. Lee Atwater ran George H.W. Bush's campaign, and also in that campaign was the Willie Horton. Remember, Willie Horton was a convicted murderer who was allowed out on furlough. While he was out on furlough, he raped a woman, stabbed her husband. Willie Horton was white, his victim was black, his victim was white, and Lee Atwater played a lot on the racial sensitivities with that, and also the crime sensitivities on that. Years later, Lee Atwater died of a brain tumor in 1991. He suffered with that tumor for a year. And in that year, he did write a letter of apology to Michael Dukakis for the Willie Horton ads. So do you want to add anything to that, or you want me to keep going?
Oh, no, it's good.
I just, you know, wanted both sides of the ball there. Remember this picture? This is Tiananmen Square, May 1989. One photograph that changed the world because of China's communist nature, stance, government, especially in 1989, before we had internet access and Twitter and tweet and everything else that we do. We really didn't know a great deal about things that were happening in China, but when a very popular somewhat democratic leader in China died, the Chinese government was not going to have a state funeral for him. And the students began to protest that. The students who wanted democracy began to protest. And so they went to Tiananmen Square in April of 1989 because they wanted some recognition for this leader who had died. And so finally the state said, fine, we'll have a state funeral. More and more students came. There were hundreds of thousands of them. The press corps went to China because there was sort of an uprising for democracy in Tiananmen Square. And then in early June, the tanks came in. Mario Di Carvalho was there with Dan Rather. And I'll let you describe. There are no official numbers as to how many students were massacred in Tiananmen Square. 250 to 7,000. That's the official number that the Chinese government would say. What was that like?
I can tell you that no 250, no 250, closer to 7,000. It was an absolute massacre. It's the interesting, again, we don't understand other countries. And we have to make, in my opinion, we have to make a bigger effort to understand other countries, other cultures, other people, and how they function. They don't make an effort to understand us. They only understand us they understand about us what they want to understand. Like the Chinese understand that we are a consumer society, so we're going, okay, fine, so we'll make everything. And we can't fall into that same way of thinking. We have to understand them. Here's what they did. Warkashi, a guy called Warkashi, was the head of the movement. And it started growing and growing and growing, and we spent a lot of time there. We were at the hotel, and we had just finished eating when someone came and told us, there's a guy standing in front of the tanks. We go, yeah. No, really. I said, no, not really. So we went to CNN. We had to leave the streets because the Chinese police will come, and it was very easy to identify us. We don't look Chinese, you're gone. And so we ran into this hotel near the Tiananmen Square. And so we went to the only pictures you see of this guy are from up high. There's no pictures of this guy doing this from the ground because we were all hiding at this hotel. And there's this guy standing in front of the tanks. But there's a reason for this. When the Chinese government decided to crack down on the demonstration, they sent in the police. The Chinese police are just, it's millions. They come out of nowhere. They all come, they all show up. But they refuse to fire or beat up their cousins, their mothers, their fathers, their sons. They said, we're not going to do this. We can push them around, but they couldn't because, in Tiananmen Square, if you've been in China, it's not a square, it's a small country. That thing is enormous. I mean, Tiananmen Square, it's right off the Mao's door, and it's just enormous. So it was packed with people, and they pushed them around. It didn't happen. So the police said, we're not doing it. So the Chinese government went, ugh, what are we going to do? Then they brought the tanks. And here's what the tanks did. Come on, get out of the way. And the guy's going, oh, man, I got my plastic bag. I'll whack you. See, he's got a plastic bag on his... I'll whack your tank with my plastic bag. Oh, no, aren't you so-and-so's cousin? It's like a little bit like South Carolina. Aren't you so-and-so's cousin? Yeah, I am. Oh, man, get out of there. No, okay, fine. So they didn't do anything. The army refused to open fire. So the army left. So now the Chinese government has a serious problem. And the thing, it's a victory for the people. Every time the police, they don't do anything, it's a victory. The tanks come, the army, they don't do anything because, again, the cousin, this, that, they leave. Here's what the Chinese, and we knew something is going to happen. This is, the people that run China are not going to let this happen. So we were a little worried, and I told Dan, Dan is like, we're in the middle of Tiananmen Square, right next to the monument, and that's where everything is going on. There's tents and people and food and that. And I said, I really got to go and find a way to get out of here if this goes south. if this goes the other way, I got to find a way. So
That's the commando.
Yeah,
That's the commando
it's
training.
like, you know, there's got to be an exit sign here somewhere. I got to get out of here. So I looked around, and on the other side of Tiananmen Square is a train station. You know, the main train station in Beijing, in you know, that part of Beijing. And I went there and I looked and I said, okay, you go, I got it. So I went back. 2 days later, the Chinese government brought soldiers from Mongolia. They flew them in, 10,000 of them. These are people that have no cousins, no son in Beijing, nothing. As a matter of fact, they've never seen cars. As a matter of fact, they have never seen houses made out of bricks. They're from northern Mongolia. They put them on planes, they flew them to Beijing, they put them on buses and trucks, and they came to Tiananmen Square, and they told them, this is the people that are destroying the fantastic way you live up in Mongolia. This is the people. Fire. And they fired. They opened fire. They opened fire. There were thousands of people there in front of us.
Were you scared?
Pardon?
Were you scared?
You don't have time to be scared. You know, here's the thing. In the morning, you go, all right, I'm not that good. I know, you know me, I know you. Can I get one more day? And if my number comes up, I'll be sitting next to you going, yeah, I know. And that's the way you have to live your life in a situation like this. It's your life. Whenever your time comes, your time comes. You take your precautions. You're not stupid about it. And you just do what you have to do. So when they opened fire, there was incredible chaos. You know, my pictures were all over, you know, the world with Dan and Richard Roth, our radio guy, got beat up bad. We had to drag him to the train station. When everybody's running up and down this avenue, I went the opposite way into the train station, down the tracks, into a farmer's, actually we talked to Dan about it, into a farmer's little hut, and hid there until the next day in the morning. And, you know, a few hours, you know, this was in the middle of the night, and then he took us to our hotel. And then that was it. Then we could not leave the hotel anymore. They posted guards there, and as soon as they closed the airport, and as soon as the airport was opened, we got out of there to Hong Kong. So that was
And a footnote to the story, the young man who was the translator for Mario and Dan
that's right.
is a young man named Bob Woodruff.
He was our translator.
Who later became the anchor, along with Elizabeth Vargas of ABC.
Okay, the other
News.
footnote is that this guy came to the hotel and said, hi, I'm Bob Woodruff, I'm an American student, I speak fluent Chinese, and I want to be an anchor, and I want to work with you. And then Rather said, where are you from? And the guy goes, I'm brother. Okay, you want to be an anchor? You want my job? He said, yes, I do. So, all right, come on in. And he was our trainer. And sure enough, he became the anchor for ABC. So you never know. You never know.
We are, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip this story, but invite us back, because that's a good story. This one, and again, I promise to keep an eye on the time, because we want to do two more and then...
Honey, we have another 2 hours.
Oh, yeah, we don't have to... We got y'all till 10, 11 o'clock tonight. This was my first story for CBS News. I had been with the company up in New York for 1 month and had anchored the 5:30 news that morning. And around 10 o'clock in the morning, my assignment editor called and said, something exploded in Oklahoma City, and it's huge, and you need to go. And I could spend an hour on this, but in the interest of time, I won't. It was the Murrah Federal Building. Getting on the airplane was fun because me and 800,000 other journalists from New York City were trying to get on every plane to Oklahoma City, and I'll never forget Harry Smith, who's this enormous man, took me under his arm, and I had a standby ticket, and Harry, of course, had a real ticket, and he tucked me under his arm, and he said to the lady with whatever airline it was, she has to be on this plane. She will sit on the toilet to fly there if necessary. I remember looking up at Harry and said, he will sit on the toilet, I'll take his seat. But that's how we were. We were all anxious. We had no idea what had happened, but we felt like it probably was something sinister. And why Oklahoma City? This is what it looked like. When I got there, it had just started getting dark, and there was a tornado warning, and it was raining, and it was horrific. But this 9-story building looked more like a little Barbie house that someone had just bitten into. There you see it from ground level. I will be very brief in telling you this, but I will just say that it was probably one of the most emotional times for me professionally. And maybe because I couldn't cry, you can't cry. And then you're working so hard, and there's no sleep. And the people of Oklahoma City were just amazing. We were all at our affiliates. So we were at the CBS affiliate. And of course, they were so gracious to us. The people of Oklahoma City were making big pots of chili and soup and sandwiches and taking it to the TV stations because they knew that we were working hard. I mean, I just never saw people pitch in like that. And I just thought, this is who we are. This is who Americans really are. We just take care of each other. A couple of days after the bombing, I was so amazed that there were people from New York City and New Zealand and Australia and Ireland who came, professional rescue, search and rescue teams. It was just amazing to see in the middle of this chaos of someone's hatred and the evil that could invoke something like this, how many good people came to the rescue. But I was not one of those good people for a moment. The day after the bombing, again, you know, we were tired and we were hungry and we were sad and we still hadn't had our chance to just go cry. And before we went on the air that next morning, Harry took me by the shoulders and he just said, I think he was talking as much to himself as he was to me, he just said, you can't cry yet, you know? You can't cry yet. And I said, I know, Harry, I can't cry yet. And he said, later, we can cry. But we can't cry right now, okay? I said, okay. You're talking to me, you're talking to yourself. So I did my 5:30 a.m. show. I appeared in the first hour with Harry, and then I had about a 30-minute break. And we had a car. We didn't have any hotel rooms yet. Didn't need them, couldn't sleep. But we had a car, and so the executive producer said to me, you've got 30 minutes, why don't you just go sit in the car and rest, and you know, then you can come back and I need you on the air at such and so a time. I said, fine. So I got in the car. 5 minutes after I was in the car, one of our producers knocked on the window, and Carol Story said, Jane, I'm sorry. She said, do you mind? She said, this is Erin. She's going to be a guest in the next half hour with Harry. Do you mind if she sits in the car with you? And in my mind, I thought, of course I mind if she sits in. I get 30 minutes. I need, of course, but I said very politely, no, of course, Erin, come sit in the car. But I was feeling a very selfish feeling inside of me, I confess to you. And as I talked to Erin, I wondered why she didn't have a coat because it was cold. And she said, well, I can't get into my apartment because it's a few blocks from here and they think that the foundation may have been compromised in the blast. But y'all, she had this really dead look in her eyes. And as I talked to her, I realized that she was Erin Allman, the mother of Bailey Allman. Yeah, and I felt real stupid and real selfish for even thinking that I should deny her time to just sit in a warm car for a few minutes. You remember this picture, right? Timothy McVeigh killed 168 people. One of them was a nurse who was killed in the rescue effort. 19 of them were children. One of them was Bailey. She died just hours after the bombing, the day after her first birthday. And you know what Timothy McVeigh said in this trial? They said, did you not realize that there was a daycare center in the Murrah Federal Building? And he said, they were collateral damage. Yeah, he was lethally injected for that one. But that was a very emotional time for America, and of course the worst act of domestic terrorism before September 11th, which I think also taught us what a strong and great country we are. There are a couple of other pictures that I have here. This was covering Princess Diana's funeral. Was a very emotional time for me. These pictures were taken in January of '97. She was killed in the car crash in September of '97. But if you remember these pictures, the princess, she was called the People's Princess. This beautiful woman went to South Angola, southern Angola, And she campaigned against her government's will. She campaigned against landmines there, the personal landmines.
Yeah.
And after her death, the Prime Minister of Great Britain joined the effort that she had made in getting rid of those. This is one that made a great deal. I'm just going to fly through these so that we get you guys out of here. But Mario and I had just been married right before the Pope came to Cuba. I think that's sort of what got us together. We spent a week together in Cuba in March of 1997. I mean, a week, we got 20 hours work days, and we would get 4 hours off. So the 5 of us that were working together got to know each other really well. And on the next to the last day, Mario looked at me and he said, I want to get to know you better. And I want you to get to know me. And we're sitting with all these other people too, right? But by now we all know how to pick each other's noses. We're so close. And Mario, but we didn't. And Mario said, I'm thinking I'm 37 years old. Nobody's ever talked to me like this before. What do I say? And he said, don't answer me here. He said, I don't want the beauty and the romance of Cuba to affect your decision. Wait until you get back to New York and then let me know. Like, fat chance of that. So it was very important for us to be married before the Pope's visit so that we could go back together as a couple. And of course, Pope John Paul II spent 5 days in Cuba. It was a wildly political event. The Cuban exiles here were very much opposed to it. The contingency in Washington was very upset about it because they knew that Pope John Paul was vehemently against the embargo that the United States had on Cuba, and they were afraid that that might change. I had a couple of letters from a couple of congressmen begging me not to go and cover this story. First time I ever kind of experienced political pressure. But it was an incredible visit. Mario noted that Fidel Castro was in a suit, not in his military uniform. While he claims to be atheist, he was Jesuit educated.
It's for the first time ever. He was in a suit receiving anybody at the airport. First time ever in his life.
And he allowed the Pope to speak live on national television, which again never happened. Never. And he knew that the Pope was going to criticize his lack of freedom for the church. But it was a big thing because Castro knew that with the fall of the Soviet Union, he was going to have to introduce capitalism on some level in order to keep his country afloat. The Pope knew that Castro knew that, and the Pope wanted to get in there and preach the word freely and encourage the people of Cuba to stand strong. And so they both got something out of it, but I think, Tim would say in the final stats, it was, Pope 7, Castro 0. Pope wins in this one. And another really dear moment, and before I move on, because we've got 2 minutes to finish.
Jane,
yes.
15 more minutes.
Oh, I don't know, y'all. I don't want to get y'all home. Well, we'll run.
Half the people left already.
I know.
Didn't you say that if people started?
But I have to say, too, that Mario has been to Cuba so many times when they were still a satellite of the Soviet Union, and he saw the changes that had occurred there. And so as we're standing there on the Grand Avenue in Havana, waiting on Pope John Paul II to come, and I had covered him in South Carolina, in New York, in Baltimore, and in New Jersey, so my Catholic friends love to say that I probably know more about the Catholic Church than most of their Catholic friends. And my husband's Catholic, so for me, yeah, he's a Methodist now. Too bad. Anyway, I'm getting way off track. As Mario and I are standing there, we're working together, we're waiting for the Pope. He had just landed at the airport. We had a team there. We're waiting for him to come up the avenue in the Pope Mobile. And there were these children around us singing songs and holding up posters. And I looked at my new husband, and he had these tears just streaming down his face and just dripping off his cheeks. And I said, "What are you crying about?" And he said, "I just never thought I would see this day. I never thought I would see this in Cuba." I think Mario and I both have a real affection for the Cuban people. They are incredible. They just love life in a really special way. Probably true of a lot of people who don't enjoy the freedoms that we do. And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Jane, these children are singing the Lord's Prayer." publicly. The first time I came to Cuba, that would have just been an impossible thought. And he said, you know, God is good all the time.
And where did they learn it?
Yeah.
Because there's no churches. You know, you have small service in people's homes, you know, in between rice and beans and little pork. And where did these kids learn? It was just terrific. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
The impact of this trip was somehow diminished because the second day of his visit to Cuba, the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke, and all the anchors left. Rather, Peter Jennings and Brokaw left. We were left there with the morning, but you know the news were dominated by Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, unfortunately, because it would have been nice, but it's the way it
Monica
goes.
7, Pope 0.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Pope still wins, right, in the long run?
Pope won.
Now, we'll wrap it up with these photographs. I'll just let Mario make some commentary. I got to tell you, I wear the ring, but the guy wears a crown when it comes to Clemson. Because we'll come on campus or go to the press box and some people go, hey, Jane, Mario. I'm like, I went to school here.
Not true. Not true.
Yeah, it is true. This is the shirt that you wore under your, tell them about this. This Clemson shirt, by the way, we had to bury. It did not come home from Iraq.
My major,
See the paw?
yeah, my artillery major is UGA. Actually, I brought him here, thanks to Tim Beret. Right after we came back from Iraq, I brought him here to the game,
Clemson, Georgia.
Georgia. And he had this Georgia shirt at the president's box. That was not.
He was very well received.
He was a great guy, but he had this little UGA sticker, and I had the paw, and I put it on my camera. So every time he looked at me, he was like, yeah. So we're here. We're at Kifl, which was the first battle fought on the other side of the Euphrates River. We had to go there at night during a sandstorm, which was not a good thing. On the other picture that's the T-shirt I wore for 11 days.
Straight. Under his...
Yeah, it will stand by itself. Under my nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare suit, my uniform, the suit, was my Clemson shirt. And I finally took it off when we got to it didn't smell anymore.
No, Clemson things don't smell. Clemson never stinks.
I finally took it off when we got to the airport in Baghdad, and I said, I got to take a picture with this. I still have that shirt.
There you go. Mario was embedded with the 3rd Infantry Division, Rock of the Marne, out of Fort Stewart. So again, honey, just take us quickly through.
That's
Mario's Humvee.
We're in Karbala, right, waiting for the time. Everybody thought, and you probably remember that, everybody was saying, oh my gosh, they went so fast and so far. They ran out of water and food, and they don't have MREs, and the supply line coming from Kuwait. We were listening to all this stuff, and we were going, What we were doing is, we really did go faster than we thought. But we had plenty of food, and it's 3,400 calories per MRE, and you eat 3 of those things a day. And you lose weight because the fear factor is so bad. And we were there waiting for no moon so we could cross the Karbala Gap. And everybody was thinking that we had lost the war by then, but we were waiting for the right time because Saddam Hussein had plans for us at that gap, but we owned the night because we have night vision goggles, and our great boys are they're great. They're the best, and that's my Humvee. I kind of hid this picture until I got back home because that's when we got hit, and a bullet came right through our windshield. And
yeah, I gotta say, it's really cool to date a combat cameraman, but when you're married to one and he actually goes off to war, it's not so cool anymore. So I didn't see any of this stuff till after he came home again.
That was it, and that's when we got to the Euphrates River. To the main crossing. You know, if we would have crossed, which we did, and Saddam Hussein knew if we crossed the river here at this point, you know, the lower left corner, we would be in Baghdad in no time. So we were beat up here, big time, with everything he had. It was 2 days a day and a half of absolute terror of fighting, and it got to hand-to-hand combat, and the sappers, the Iraqi sappers trying to destroy I gotta tell this little story. The sappers, the Iraqi sappers filled, and I have a picture, it's not here, filled under the bridge over the Euphrates with explosives, with tons of explosives. And they put this cable to a little house, probably half a mile away, where they had the detonator. So when we would go over the bridge, they will detonate that, and there will be psychological, a big blow. Not only the guys on top of the bridge would die, but it will be a big blow. Our Green Berets, a successful mission for a Green Beret is that if you don't fire a shot, you're there to observe and then direct the fire. But they can fight as well, believe me. So they found the guys, they saw them, they saw the cable, they saw the explosives, they knew we were coming up, and they waited, and then they fought us from the other side of the river, and then we said, my colonel said, okay, we're going. And the special forces said, watch this. I was there, I was right next to the guy. And the guy's there, and they don't wear helmets, they have the little hats, from their universities and colleges. And the guy goes, watch this. And he gets the red and goes, ba, 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 ba. Just wait. And from 40,000 feet up, one of our planes dropped the bomb. That special forces, a laser-guided bomb, and you have one special forces guy pointing the laser at the cable, and we cut the cable with a bomb that was dropped from 40,000 feet up. So you have the Iraqis going, sorry. Isn't that amazing? And I'm sitting there going, man.
Special Forces 7, Iraqi 0.
and then we crossed the river, and there was.
Oh, sorry. Okay, just want to show you that one. There's Mario with his favorite buddy,
Saddam.
And then this one, a final slide, just to show you the glamorous lifestyle that combat correspondents and their team live. That's a sandstorm. That's not a special film on the camera.
That's what it really looks like.
That's what it looks like in a sandstorm over there. And then this is how Mario got to do his laundry.
Finally got to the airport and it was laundry time. But I can't go home for mom, like in college. Hi, Mom, here's my laundry. So I had to go.
And finally, thanks to our 13-year-old George, well, you'll be 13 on Tuesday. This is a PowerPoint, which I have no idea how to put together, but George put this together. So he wanted to have his little picture showing you when he caught the skate in Miami last year. You all have been so dear. I know we're past time. And
sorry about that.
If anybody wants to stay and ask a couple of questions, we're happy to. If you have to go, I totally understand, because as somebody who normally has to speak in 30-second increments and 15-second increments,
or if you have
I've
any
gone
questions,
way over time.
please feel free.
But thank you all for having us. Thank you very much. Here, but if y'all need, hi, nice to see the lilies. Any questions?
Too many.
Too many. We'll do lunch. Thank you all so much. And I want to say a special thanks to the founders and the patrons of the Strom Thurmond Institute. As a native South Carolinian and a Clemson graduate, it really means a lot to me that we have this fine place. And thanks to Jeff for doing such a great job. Thank you, Joyce, for inviting me. Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. I like the paper, too.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for your time and attention. It was great to see so many friends tonight. Good night.